Okay, let's get into this thing because what an incredible weekend that it was. There were no great games, at least on paper, going into the weekend, and then it turned into really kind of like an epic weekend with an unbelievable nightcap on Saturday from Boulder. I want to start, though, with my top 10. And really, I wish it was 11 because I want to include like Oregon in this discussion. But let's frame it this way. For a long time, really for the better part of a decade, and this speaks to the dominance of teams like Alabama and Clemson and even Georgia and even Ohio State at times. But you could really put a line under, at times, the number 1 team in college football, the number 2 team, the number 3 team, and just be like, these 2 or 3 are so above everybody else. Everybody else is like way, way behind. And then we just know that the champion is going to come from one of those 3. It's been like that for a long time. And candidly, and college football fans, we talk about this all the time. That was kind of boring, right? And I think that I would even agree with you. And as great as I think the sport is, and as much as I love it, there was only like so many Alabama Clemson national championships that we could have before it's like, oh my gosh, we're playing a whole season and we know exactly who's going to be in the national championship game. Now we get to 2023, we have no idea. And that line has fallen from below 1, 2, or 3, or even 4 to like 11. 11. And that's why I'm sorry, Oregon fans, you don't see your logo up here. And it's just because the template wouldn't fit 11 teams. I include Oregon in this. If you go down to 11, I don't know who the best team is. And that's amazing for the sport. That's not a knock. That is not a knock. I am here for it this year. I think that this is going to be an unbelievable finish to this thing. So I've got Georgia and Michigan up there at the top, but let's face it, those are kind of placeholders for teams that we felt like were going to be great going into the season. Texas on the back of the win against Alabama, although does that look very good right now? USC is at 4. I think they're really good. Haven't played anybody. Washington, you could say something similar, although holy cow. How about that performance? More on that and what happened in East Lansing in a little bit. Ohio State at 6. They could easily be higher after the way that they played. Florida State at 7. They got the big win and the struggle. Penn State's in there. Utah, Notre Dame, Oregon. All these teams. I think any of these teams could beat any of the other teams on any given Saturday. And that is what I'm here for. I've been arguing for a long time that we've needed to achieve or strive for a greater amount of parity in the sport. And I think that we've got it this year. And so I'm going to celebrate it. I think that it's fantastic. Now, having said that, I do think that that means that we don't have a great team this year in college football. That doesn't mean that none of these teams can't become great. Okay. Because let's face it, even in like 2019, at this point in the season, I don't think LSU even knew that they were great. They built upon that road victory at Texas and became a great team. And in particular, at the end of the season, played some of the best football that we've ever seen. So that doesn't mean that one of these teams can't become great. But at this point, we can take stock in what the season is and has become and what these teams are. Not what we think they are, but what they are. And after 3 weeks, I don't know if we've got a great team in college football. We've got a bunch of really good teams. So that second tier from a few years ago has gotten better, and the top tier has maybe regressed just a little bit and come back to the pack. And I think that that's great. And by the way, this last weekend was a case study in what I'm just talking about. You can go line by line through these teams and find flaws. And then you can find things that you're like, yeah, but I really love this about them. And I think that's a very cool thing. So like even Georgia, I don't think they look like the clear-cut number 1 team. They're going to stay there because they've won back-to-back national championships. Obviously, their roster is really talented. But should the number 1 team at home be down 14-3 at halftime to South Carolina? Probably not. Probably not. But this year they are, okay? There are a lot of teams that I think in that top 11 could break through and get to the playoff for the first time. You've got like Texas and USC. They've never been to the playoff. Florida State's never been to the playoff. Penn State's been the bridesmaid, never the bride, more than anybody else in the playoff era. Utah is in there. They could make a push for a playoff. These teams could be breaking through for their program, which is a great thing. And then you get to kind of the subtext of what's going on. And what's going on is that the SEC is not dominating college football this year. What we normally see in college football is that there's two great teams out of the SEC, sometimes three great teams, and then like maybe one other one. And it's been Ohio State for a long time. There was Clemson for a long time. There was Florida State for a couple of years, Oregon early in the playoff era. And you could say like, okay, those are the four best teams. But now you look up and in the AP top 10, there's only one SEC team. That's the first time in 6 years that there's only been one SEC team in the top 10 in the AP poll. The last time was after week 3 of the 2017 season when Bama was number 1 and they didn't have much. Georgia hadn't become Georgia yet. And so now you're seeing some of that parity. The other conferences getting really good. And yet, like, I'll go back to this point that you see some of these teams and they have struggled. And yet you can praise some of the things that they've done. Georgia, Michigan, Texas, Florida State, Penn State, grinding out wins this weekend against teams that they should really handle. All right? Like, Georgia trailing 14-3 is unacceptable. But they played great in the second half, like a championship team should do. 21-0 run in the second half, and they win kind of going away. Michigan led, 7-6 with the 5 minutes left in the second quarter? That's not dominant. J.J. McCarthy, I was singing his praises before my game, Illinois-Penn State, about how he was the best quarterback in the Big Ten, goes out there, throws 3 terrible picks. So it's like, nah. But then what do? Turn it on and win going away against Bowling Green, 24-0 the rest of the way. Texas tied at 10 in the fourth quarter with Wyoming. What are we doing? This always goes to that thing. What do I tell you about Texas? And I'm going to continue to tell you this unless they change. They always play to the level of their competition. That's what makes the Big 12 so difficult for them, even though them and Oklahoma are the only 2 Big 12 teams ranked at this point. Now, having said that, what do they have? Firepower. In the fourth quarter, they win going away, 21-0 run. So like for all the things you can criticize, then there's things that you're like, oh, wow. But, clearly they've got that top end potential. Penn State only led by 6 in the second quarter against an Illinois team that could not play offense at all. That Illinois team can play defense, though. But at the end of the day, like Gus and I are going through filler material for the entire fourth quarter because it's like games in hand. Because the defense got, 5 takeaways on the day? They were dominant on the defensive side. Drew Aller did what he needed to do, didn't turn the ball over. The one that's the most alarming is Florida State. I mean, I guess you could say like it was just reverse from everything that I just said. All these other teams, you could say like slept walk through portions of the first half and then turned it on late. Florida State built up a big lead, played well, 31-10 in the third quarter, looked fine, and then all of a sudden, here comes Boston College. So it was reversed. But then you look up at the end, and you're like, man, BC had real chances in that game. Like real chances in that game. Missed an extra point in the third quarter. That was critical. They failed on a 4th and 2 from the Florida State 5 in the third quarter. Had the ball down 2 with 4 minutes left. Couldn't get anything going. Had to punt it away. I mean, like they did all of this and had 18 penalties, Boston College. So that's the only one where I'm like, okay, Florida State did not look great. They did not look great. These teams we expect more out of. So to the point, has parity arrived? Yes. Yes, it has, because we don't have the clear number 1.